Greetings, pen friends. Welcome to another review video. Now, if you were to pick one pen company as kind of the granddaddy of fountain pens, I think there's a very fair argument that the granddaddy of fountain pens, at least modern fountain pens, would be the Waterman Company. Waterman was founded in the late 1800s. They credit themselves with being with their founder being the inventor of the fountain pen. Now, there's some very interesting questions about that floating around. And if you head over to the linked article on penhabit.com, which is up there, it'll be at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you can find a link to a really fascinating article that is all about whether the history that Waterman tells the world is accurate or not. It's like 30, 40 pages long. It's really, really interesting. And if you're into pen history, I would highly suggest you read it. In any case, Waterman really hit their heyday in the 1920s and 30s. And they made a lot of pens with beautiful flex nibs and made out of these really interesting ebonites and hard rubbers. So they were very, very popular. They did, proving the adage that nothing hinders innovation like success, though, they really struggled to make the transition out of ebonite and hard rubbers and into the more colorful acrylics, or not acrylics, but plastics like celluloids. So through the 30s and 40s and 50s, they really struggled. Eventually, they shut down US operations, and their operations were picked up in Europe. And then they were sold through different companies. They were owned by Bic for a while. I don't remember if they still are or not. But Waterman kind of lost its hold in the collective consciousness of serious fountain pen users, especially lately. You know, you'll find Watermans ad nauseum at pen shows, vintage Watermans. But it's very rare that you come across serious pen collectors who use modern Waterman pens. Myself included. I had never used a modern Waterman pen until I got this one, and I'm really excited to show it to you today. So, the pen in question is the Waterman Carène. It's a really interesting pen. So it comes in this box. It's a dark blue box with a light blue ribbon that's attached with the Waterman logo in gold and the little W that is embroidered. And inside you come to this pen. We'll show the pen in just a second, but then you've got a box of cartridges in Serenity Blue, and a little brochure and a converter. The converter comes with the pen. I've got it in the pen right now because I've got it inked. But here is the pen. So this is the Waterman Carène. It's a very interesting design pen, and it comes in a variety of finishes. This is what's known as the gunmetal finish. And this Waterman uses what they call a PVD coating. So that stands for, I got to look it up here, it's physical vapor deposition. So they vaporize the metals that are on the surface of the pen using a plasma flame, and then the pen is put in a vacuum and the materials adhere to the body of the pen in that vacuum. It's supposed to make a very tough, very resistant coating. It's used a lot in watches, I know, and a lot in industrial applications as well. So in this particular case, they used it to put this slightly darker metal. Now, in regular light, this darker metal almost looks silver until you see how it compares to the silver of the cap band and the little end finial here and the clip. So it's a really interesting pen. Kind of comes to points on each end, but the point down on this end, you'll notice, is not, it's kind of angular. I actually find this to be quite an attractive design and quite unlike anything I've seen. It's got this zigzag pattern across the surface, which I really, really like. The clip has a cutout in it with the Waterman logo at the top, and it's hinged, so nice hinged clip. You've got the band down here that says Waterman. I can't see it. France. I can't see it with all the reflection. And then, as I mentioned, you've got this kind of odd-shaped finial down here at the end with a little black inlay. I think it's a very attractive pen. And I don't normally go for metal pens, but I have to say, kind of the chiseled look of this, it does a couple things. First of all, it helps to hide fingerprints. Fingerprints don't show up super easily on this pen, which I really like. I also just think it's kind of neat. kind of a neat finish, not something you see every day. Now, I bought this for me. We bought there's another version which has the gunmetal and blue, or I believe it's silver and blue, excuse me. So the barrel is blue, but the cap is silver. We bought that one for my business partner. It's a pop-top cap, so cap comes right off. And here you have this really interesting inlaid nib, which we will get to in just a moment. The tenon on the section here is metal, and the body is metal, so you probably don't want to try using this as an eyedropper, but I don't know how well you'll be able to see this. They have inserted a plastic cap into the barrel, so it's plastic on metal instead of metal on metal, so you don't get any of that squeaking. They also have a nice little rubber ring here to keep the threads nice and tight, keep the barrel in place if you want to. It does come with a converter. This is actually quite a nice converter, and Waterman uses standard international converters. They've got their own, this is their own branded converter, but they use the international standard system. So all their cartridges are standard international. So if you've got a standard international cartridge or converter, it should work in this pen just fine. Go ahead and close that back up, and then we'll get to the section. So the section is nice and long. It's made of a black plastic, and then inlaid into it is this really nice, very interesting wishbone-shaped nib in 18-karat gold that has been plated. It's a fascinating nib, and I can't wait to show you a little bit more about it to you when we get to the writing sample, but it really is quite a fascinating nib. The section is nice and long, which I like, and because there's no threads here, you can really hold this anywhere you want to. So if you want to hold it all the way down here, you can. You want to hold it up here, you can. There's really no bad place to hold this pen. It's very similar in that respect to something like the Parker 51, where it's kind of this unibody shape, but with a slight difference with this inlaid nib instead of a hooded nib. I actually think this is quite a bit more attractive. Plus, if you tend to roll the pen like I do, having the visual impact of this nib always helps me know if I've got it aligned or if I'm rolling it too much to the side. So that's always kind of a neat thing. So let me show you how this writes. Well, first let's do a few measurements, and then I'm going to show you how this writes, because this is a very interesting nib. So when I bought this pen, I really wasn't sure what to expect with this nib. I've never, as I mentioned, never used a modern Waterman before, and I have only a couple of times used inlaid nibs, both of them Schaefer's in the past. So I wasn't sure what to expect. What I didn't expect is what I got. So first of all, this is a medium, but it is one of the broadest mediums I've ever used. This seems to be very much on par with what you might expect from a Pelikan medium, like in the M800, M1000 line. It's a very wide line, but more interestingly, look at how stubby it is. You get a much wider downstroke than you do the cross strokes, which are quite a bit skinnier. So it is really quite an unusually stub-like line. Now, I will say that when I first inked up the pen, it was wetter than it is. I'm getting close to the end of the inking, and I didn't want to ink it up again totally from scratch. And it's also been sitting for several weeks, so it has dried out a little bit. And that is one minor downside on this pen, is the cap is not super airtight, I don't feel, and so the pen will dry out a little bit. That being said, right now it's a nice moderate wetness. It's not too wet, it's not too dry. And I think this ink tends to run just a touch on the dry side anyway. So you can see it's a nice ink flow, but not so much that it's going to be unusable. That's especially important because this is such a broad nib for a medium. The other thing to point out is that even though this is 18 karat gold, do not expect any sort of bounce. There really isn't much bounce with this nib. It's pretty rigid. So just keep that in mind. What it is very smooth. It's almost too smooth. It kind of floats right on that barrier of really smooth and too smooth. I looked at it under the loupe and I saw what I might call the very barest hint of a baby's bottom problem. And for those not familiar with the term, that's when instead of being like this, the nib tip bends down just a little bit, leaving a small gap between the end of the ink flow and the paper. When the pen had been sitting for a long time, I did run into hard starts for the first couple lines until the ink got flowing, and then that went away. I also would see minor hard starting on really, really slick paper like Clairefontaine or some Rhodia papers. But usually, again, after writing for a line or two, that would go away and it wouldn't be an issue. I think it's mainly an airtightness issue when the pen is capped. I just don't think the pen is super airtight when it's capped. That is one unfortunate aspect of the pen, but not one that is insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. I'd say it's probably about a 1.5 to 2 on the feedback scale. There's just barely enough feedback to know that you're writing, but you certainly don't need any pressure, and it writes quite nicely once it gets going if you don't run into any problems with the hard starting or skipping for the first couple of lines worth of writing. This is the third inking of this pen I've done since I've gotten it. I love writing with this pen. I've used it a lot more than I was expecting to, partially because it's just very comfortable in the hand. It's one of those things, again, because you can grip it anywhere you want. You know, you can grip it up here, you can grip it down here, but no matter where it grips, it feels pretty nice in the hand. It also posts really, really deeply. It's not super secure, but secure enough. And because it posts so deeply, this is a pen that is really actually quite nice to use posted as well. At least it is for me because it sits right there in the web of my hand. So overall, I have to say I have been very pleasantly surprised by this Waterman. I think there are a lot of people out there who would really, really like this pen. I am one of them. I really like this pen, and it's more affordable than you might expect. So what I would say is, if you haven't used modern Waterman pens, maybe give them a look, because I've been pretty impressed with this. It's quite comfortable. The nib is really nice. The ink flow is good. There are a couple of minor design flaws, as there are in any pen. In my case, it is a lack of airtightness in the cap, what I assume is a lack of airtightness in the cap. But other than that, the construction quality is great. The nib is wonderful. It's really, really nice writer. So the list price on this pen is around $399. Now that seems a little high for this pen. What I will tell you is if you pay $399 for it, you're paying way too much. So I've seen it anywhere from $300 to $320, which I consider to be really quite a nice value. It's a very nicely made pen with quite a unique finish, and of course this lovely inlaid nib, which I like quite a bit as well. So maybe out of the price range for some people, but for a lot of others, I think it's really reasonable, and you can probably even find them used for a little bit less than that. So I would, if you haven't looked at these modern Watermans, maybe give them a look, because I have to say I've been pretty impressed with this one. If the rest of their line writes like this one does, I have a sneaking suspicion I'm going to need to spend a little bit of time navigating through their offerings. So, in any case, thank you so much for watching this review. Of course, you can always head over to penhabit.com and check out the written review and the additional photos over there. And leave your comments down below if you're on YouTube, or over on the Penhabit written review. You can leave your comments there as well. You can also email me, penhabit@gmail.com. And I will say, if you have a question that you think would be better suited to a larger audience, so something for Currently Inked, let's say, on penhabit.com, down at the bottom of the page, there is a link to submit questions for the Currently Inked episodes, the long Q&A episodes that I do. So if you've got a question, I'd suggest you post it there, because chances are I will get to that one before I am able to get to the email responses. I try to get to them, but I do get a lot of emails, so I can't always respond as quickly as I'd like. In any case, really, thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to maybe check out a Waterman, maybe a Carène, see if you can get your hands on a little inlaid nib action. And until next time, we will see you here on the Pen Habit. Bye.